Right, right. Well, actually, they've you can find on the web some of the examples of the ballots that have been challenged, and some of them are kind of fascinating. I mean, people who start to circle in the little oval like you would see on the SAT, and then fill in the other one darker, or they put an X in it, and there are all kinds of variations of what could have happened. So some of them strike me as being fairly clear in the voters' intent, and some really just are a total toss-up. I've got no idea what they meant.
All right, more to come here as we talk tonight with Lou Jacobson, editor of Congress Now. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We'll be right back here at Westwood One. Welcome back. This is the Jimbo Hannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We're talking with Lou Jacobson. He is editor of Congress Now on the web at congressnow.gallerywatch.com, the website on Congress and legislative matters from a couple of those prominent Capitol Hill news organizations, Roll Call and Gallery Watch. Now, I'm looking here at the whole notion of vote counting in this country. I have been bothered for longer than the 2000 Florida count about the notion of the paper trail. The idea that, there's a digital age and it's fine if we can enter into that provided that there is always a paper trail. I mean, the idea that little ones and zeros that can disappear into the ether as the basis for our democratic society, that bothers me tremendously. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people feel that way with some justification. If you have some kind of malfunction, really those votes just disappear into thin air, and there's no way to reconstruct it. At least if you have some kind of ballot backup paper trail, you can try to figure out after the fact if there is a problem. We are seeing states go back that direction. There was a period after 2000 in the recount where the focus was on a lot of these old paper systems and the CHADs, and it just seems so very retro, so very old-fashioned. And there was a push to sort of bring it into the modern age, and then people, and that was done, fairly quickly. At least the sort of thinking behind this was done fairly quickly because they wanted to get things in place for in time for the next election. And there was a lot of money spent. Congress passed a bill which basically allowed states to use federal money to do the upgrades, and there were always at that time people saying, "Hey, look, don't go so fast and totally go totally digital because of the problems that you cite." But a lot of states, for whatever reason, did choose some of these machines which had no ballot paper trail, and then as the concern got bigger and just a fear that there were going to be problems, I think states have started to come around. I think there are at least some cases in which new systems that were used in, I guess, perhaps one or two election cycles are now being phased out because they don't have the paper trail and are now getting into the realm of new systems which do have that paper trail sort of aspect to it.
Well, I certainly hope so. I must confess that it really just freaks me out to hear this notion of, hey, it's new. Well, we got to try it if it's new. Ladies and gentlemen, just because something is new doesn't make it better, and just because something is old doesn't make it worse. We're not trying to ratify the gross national science fair here. We're trying to accurately count our votes.
Right.
And if we have to do that in a slower manner, I'm sorry, accuracy trumps speed every time. And I speak as a member of the media who is insatiable in our desire for a quick and almost instantaneous vote count.
Of course. Yeah, no, I mean, probably the one, there are probably two different universes of people who care about getting these fast results. It's journalists and politicians. aside from that, I think people, they certainly want to know eventually who won, but I don't think it has to be, the second that the polls close. And I think that there's, a lot of flexibility in voters' minds. Look, get it right. I don't care how you do it. I don't necessarily care how long it takes, as long as it's in a reasonable time period. So I do think there is that feeling out there.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. It wouldn't be a bad idea, really, to get rid of this notion of the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's certainly a good argument for that, too.
To get rid of the idea of Tuesday, which goes back to some archaic basis for how long it takes you to travel to your marketplace to cast a vote, some 18th century concept there, and just have, say, maybe a weekend of voting, a 48-hour voting period, a common poll closing, so maybe the polls would be open, say, from 6 p.m. to Friday night to 6 p.m. Sunday night Pacific time, 9 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time. I know that would bring about a serious problem of people manning the polls.
Right.
Maybe it's an insurmountable one, but at least you would have time for people to vote. You would have no need for them to miss work or school to do so.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of appeal for that. I think what you're seeing in the 2000 election particularly is that the concept of doing early voting really came of age. I don't have exact figures about how many people use it, but it seems like it seemed to grow dramatically as a realistic option that certainly in a lot of states didn't even exist before, and even those that did, it seems to be becoming more popular. I think people feel like they're over scheduled these days, with so many duties, picking up kids from daycare and going to school and going to work. And I think people appreciated the fact that, hey, if I can't do it on Tuesday, at least I can do it on Wednesday or on Monday.
Yeah, and I am the first person to say I believe we must have an increase in voter participation. I'm the person who champions the idea of every 2 years having a national lottery, actually 51 of them in the 50 states in the District of Columbia, where one person who actually votes will win $1 million. I think it might, in our lottery-mad society, might jumpstart turnout maybe 5%.
Yeah,
and,
no, I think
I favor that, but goodness knows, is it that odious and onerous to suggest that people have a proper identification when they vote?
Yeah, well, actually, the idea of the lottery, I believe it was tried in a ballot initiative in Arizona a couple years ago, and it went down. It failed. I thought it was an intriguing idea, but at least in that one case, it didn't get voter support, and in fact, I have not seen it resurrected anywhere else across the country.
Yeah. Well, anyway, getting back to the initial situation right now of the Democrats in this new Congress, there are going to be those who will say, finally, after all those years in the terrible Republican conservative wilderness, we have the votes. Let's get health care and a pacifist foreign policy and whatever else is on the agenda and get it done before 2010, because who knows how the votes may change. On the other hand, aren't you going to have a few of these new Democrats who are maybe interested in a long career, mindful of the fact that they have been elected in a Democratic year in marginal districts, who may be loath to take part in a tidal wave of liberal ideas?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. I think probably even a bigger factor is the fact that the new president certainly is coming out of the box in a very centrist way, which frankly doesn't surprise me too much, just having seen him throughout the campaign. He sort of temperamentally, to me, particularly as the campaign wore on, never gave off the signal that he was going to, even though his theme was change, he never seemed to favor the most radical solution. He always seemed to be someone who liked to sort of calmly think about his response and not just go off half-cocked. And I think that in terms of the folks he is appointing to his cabinet and his aides in the White House, he seems to be going on a more centrist approach, stylistically and substantively. And so I think that even if Congress, was eager to make some sort of radical change, or even somewhere between a moderate and a radical change, I would say that he would try to push back against that, even to the point of vetoing things. But I don't think it would necessarily get to that point. I think he would try to work with Congress and gain some sort of consensus. Now, of course, Congress can try to pass whatever they want, and in the House, because of the way it's structured, the Speaker on down, the sort of power is all theirs, and the GOP minority will not have much of a say. And in the Senate, the GOP minority will have somewhat more of a say, particularly now they're not at the 60 vote threshold. So I would see both Congress and the President being a little bit more on the cautious side, particularly right now, given the state of the economy. I don't think they want to suddenly embark on grand new guarantees of spending and benefits. Their first task is to get the economy straightened out.
We'll come back and we'll talk some more here with our guest tonight, Lou Jacobson, editor of Congress Now, on the web at congressnow.gallerywatch.com. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Jimbo Hannon Show. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number. 1-866-505-4626. Let us talk to Grant in Montpelier, Vermont, with our guest Lou Jacobson. Good evening, Grant.
Good evening. I have two quick questions.
Okay.
One is, how come we can't have a national rules for elections rather than state by state? Wouldn't that make more sense? Same rules for everyone?
I guess you would have to change things considerably in terms of the law. I'm not even sure if constitutionally that would be allowed, Lou.
I believe constitutionally the sort of place and manner of elections is left up to the states. Now, there is obviously some degree of power that the federal government has, obviously setting the day of the election. But most of that stuff really does sort of devolve to the states, and you'd have to basically pass a constitutional amendment, I believe, to do that.
Yeah, I think
do you think that would make sense?
Well, I think some of these things might be able to be done short of doing that, but it would take a lot of political will to do that, and it's tough because I tend to think electoral type of movements are not usually top on people's list. Obviously the economy, issues of war and peace tend to be, very serious motivators of people. And while, people might say, yeah, it might be better to vote this way, I think it's very hard to get a sort of grassroots movement organized to really put on political pressure to do that.
Yeah. And I'm not sure personally that there is that much of a compelling need to do so. I mean, just making things neater and less messy is not necessarily a virtue in a free society. What was your second question there, Grant?
Okay, well, about how Congress functions is the question, I guess, is how come they're allowed to tack on non-germane items to bills? I think you know what I mean. Like,
sure.
Well, sure, earmarks. And the reason is because there's no prohibition.
Right.
Well, I think I think there ought to be.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's kind of like blackmail, hijacking a bill because to get it passed, you have to vote for this other project that maybe you don't want to, but it's not related.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, the old saying I think really is true here that seeing bills made is like seeing sausage made. I mean, it's not a pretty process, and it's just sort of developed that way. And it's not something that can really be changed, other than...
Well, it could be changed. You could simply require that a bill could only be amended with germane amendments. I mean, goodness knows, we've got to start making choices in this country. We've got to have a line-item veto for the president. We've got to have some form of a balanced budget amendment with teeth. And we've got to have an end to earmarks, or we are just going to simply deficit ourselves to death in this country.
Yeah, well, basically it boils down to the politicians, having the power, and it's just very hard to get them to change that. It's such an insider thing. Again, here, like the voting question, I don't necessarily see a lot of people getting angry about this, and unless there's widespread anger about something, Congress often does not act.
Yeah, and I would note, and thank you for your call, by the way, Grant. I would note that frankly, I have never seen that as an argument. I mean, I've not had that many members of Congress who represent me who say, hey, I bring home the bacon. I consider that a reason to vote against somebody. And how venal and selfish are we if we can live in a country with the problems we have and say, wow, look what Senators Byrd or Stevens brought home. I mean, I think that's un-American as hell.
Yeah, well, it does win votes, though, and it sends them back every year.
It wins votes from people who are frankly lousy Americans, in my humble opinion. One other thing that we should talk about here, I think, about the idea of the liberals maybe who backed Obama, who gave him his initial thrust against Hillary Clinton, now seeing Bob Gates retained at the Pentagon and a host of other appointments. I think if I were George Soros, I would start already thinking about bankrolling a liberal challenge to Obama in 2012 in the primaries.
Well, certainly I could see how people might feel that way. For better or for worse, I do think Obama has a bit of running room here. We've come through 8 years of George Bush, who was even more thoroughly reviled by folks on the left. And he's not even sworn in yet. He's still got, 40-odd days until then. I think that he will have still something of a honeymoon, just because he will stop the kind of rightward drift we saw in the Bush years, and so I do think there will certainly be some grumbling, but I don't see it as a serious threat yet. Now, obviously, if 6 months or a year goes by and the economy isn't better and he hasn't done all kinds of other things, he could face some more serious gripes. But just things like he will be choosing probably a Supreme Court justice or two in the next 2 or 3 years. Things like that, I think, will sort of periodically serve to remind people that he's far better, if you're from a liberal perspective, than George Bush was.
And if you are prone to start thinking in terms of half a loaf, which I'm afraid a lot of these folks may not be, we'll see. We'll come back and talk some more here with Lou Jacobson from Congress Now, and we'll be right back here at Westwood One. Our guest is Lou Jacobson, editor of Congress Now, as we continue on the Jimbo Hannon Show, and we're talking a bit about this new Congress. Now, there is the issue of the use of power. When you're in the majority, to a certain extent, how much power you have and how you use it is discretionary. You can be velvet-gloved or with a fist of iron with your opponents. What's been the record so far, in your view, of the Pelosi-Reid leadership of Congress treating Republicans in comparison with when the Republicans were in power and how they treated Democrats?
It's a good question. I think that's a clearer case in the House, just because of the way the rules are structured in the House. I think they're probably broadly similar. I think one could make the argument that things were a little bit more pro-majority, anti-majority in the GOP years, but I don't think it's a sort of black and white issue. I think both parties have taken full advantage of the powers that they have. And have used every opportunity to make sure that the minority doesn't get a chance to either